Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining me today at Real Estate Explained. I have a very special guest today. She is an appraiser. So today I'd like to concentrate on discussing and talking and understanding appraisals. So help me introduce Danielle Ohrin. Danielle, tell us a little about yourself and how you got into the appraisal world.
Thank you. First of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm a local real estate appraiser in the Capital District in the state of New York. I've had my own company for about 13 years, and I got into the real estate business after college. I got my real estate license and met an appraiser during my real estate venture, and I found that I really enjoyed valuing much more than selling. So
Awesome. So do you mainly work for yourself? Do you work for banks? How does that work?
So I am an independent appraiser, and what I do primarily get a lending work, but I do a lot of appraisals as well for people trying to grieve their taxes, for estate planning, for divorces. Basically, anyone who needs an appraisal, I'm here.
Awesome. And I'm glad you mentioned that because I think a lot of people do. First of all, we're going to go over this, but they confuse the appraisal with maybe their assessment. And, I'm actually doing some continuing education right now for myself. And I guess the use of the appraisal is really important. Like, what are your attention for getting that appraisal? And it really only should be good for that use, not necessarily, if you're doing a divorce, it's for that divorce. If you're doing a real estate, it's real estate. So that was interesting because I never thought of it that way.
Yes, our definition of market value can change. The IRS, if you're doing an appraisal for, say, an inheritance, the IRS has their own definition of value. And so, if I'm doing an appraisal for the IRS, even that is completely different than, say, a lender.
Interesting. So this is why I wanted to do this, because I was on the radio show last week and we had a lot of questions about this as well. So I thought you'd be the perfect person to help me. So let's get started with like the basics of understanding an appraisal. So what does an appraiser actually do?
So at the moment where most people meet me, I'm inspecting the home. So I walk through the house and I look at how the house is been maintained or how it's been updated. I measure the home. A lot of times tax records is different than an appraiser would measure.
Okay.
And I basically just kind of walk through and visualize how the house would compare to other homes that are selling in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. So I guess so as far as who does the appraisal work? As far as the appraiser. So again, you talked about having you're an independent appraiser.
Yes.
So when you're doing the job, are you doing the job, say for me, like a realtor, because I call you and say I need an appraisal for a real estate home? Are you doing it for the seller? Are you doing it for the bank? So let's maybe dissect that a little bit because I think those are important to talk about.
So we have a standard of practice called USPAP. And we abide by something called the ethics code. So no matter who hires us, we are supposed to provide an objective opinion of value. Okay. So I have an opinion of value, but it has to be objective. So even if Bob hires me off the street, my opinion of value is not going to be influenced by who hires me. It's going to be, it is what it is, based on the market, based on the statistics, based on the numbers. And so no matter who hires me, a good appraiser is going to be an objective appraiser.
Right. And I think that's important to point out because, as realtors, sometimes we get pressured, hey, we need this appraisal to come in at X amount. Specific ventures or journeys for different people, say it's a divorce situation, and they may want a lot of money or a little money for the house. So you being that subjective person, you're getting paid to do a job that, from what I'm hearing, because we've talked about this in the past, to come back
be
to you
tough.
10 years later, right? So
Yes.
the underwriting or however you process this, if the bank at some point questions this can follow you for many, many years. So it's important for people to know that, you just can't call an appraiser and say, hey, I need X amount for my house because of X, Y, Z. It's good for the appraiser to know why you need it for, because they could adjust it a little bit differently. However, it's not just something that you could just put on paper and justify it just because somebody wants it. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, for lending work, we're required to come up with an exact pinpointed dollar amount, but value really can be in a range.
Mm-hmm.
So, you might be able to sell a home for, $5,000 to $10,000. That might be the actual value range that you're dealing with. But we are required with lending work to come up with an exact dollar amount.
And how do you do that?
Well, I waited off of the best sale, like my most favorite sale. I'll give it the greatest weight.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will use other sales to kind of reinforce that range. And so I will most of the time go based off of my best sale and get as close to that number. In an increasing market, I might make some market adjustments, do some time calculations. But every market really is different and every situation is different. You just have to kind of analyze what's going on. But to put it most simply, I would base it off of my best comparables.
All right. So comparables. Thank you. Because you keep on saying best sale. Is it one that Danielle likes because it's pretty and it's pink? Or is it so let's dissect that a little bit because, the general public really doesn't know. Are you looking at square footage? Are you looking at number of bedrooms, number of bathrooms, condition,
with every market
factors, right?
Yes. So every market's different. So right now we're experiencing low inventory, right? So our choices are a little bit narrower. We might have to search a little bit farther. We might have to broaden our search a little bit more than we ordinarily would. In a saturated, stable market, you want to be as close to the subject as a model match as possible, almost like as close to as a twin as possible in location, living area, condition, updates. And so sometimes you can get close and then you use your other comps to kind of bring it in closer, like matching the garage count, matching the updated kitchens, bathrooms, the yard updates like in-ground pools, things like that. So it can be quite a lengthy search.
Right. And I think what's important also to note is that you have specific guidelines that you have to also follow because, we talk about, measuring the ceiling height, right? So if the ceiling height doesn't match, you may not be able to use the full square footage of that space based on the guidelines of the bank. So it's not just also being comparable to your neighbor, possibly. It's how does it actually look and weight and, how do you count it towards the guidelines that you have to follow?
Yeah. So April of last year, Fannie Mae brought about using ANSI measurement standards. So if you're using a Fannie Mae insured loan, that's the standard that you're going to have your house measured by. FHA hasn't followed those guidelines yet, and neither has VA. So not necessarily all houses will be measured the same, but Fannie Mae is the big player in the lending industry. So chances are you will be measured by ANSI measurement standards.
Okay. So let's talk about the buyers then. So how does the appraisal affect a buyer? And at what point does the appraisal kick in for the buyers? So a buyer is somebody that is in contract, they're purchasing a home, and they're getting a mortgage. So now one of the steps of the purchase process is the appraisal. So let's talk about that a little bit. How do you get contacted and where do you start?
Well, so lenders will contact me. I usually get it through what's called an appraisal management company. Most banks use this as like a buffer to not order directly from an appraiser. I have between 50 and 100 different banks and AMC contact lists. So I get orders from, multiple sources. And basically at that point, you've gone through the attorney approval, you've done your home inspection, and the lender will say, okay, it's time to order the appraisal. They'll shoot that order out to me, and I will call up. I like to call up the listing agent, but I'll call up whoever the point of contact is to get into the home, and we'll start from there.
Okay. And as far as, as far as an agent, so say I'm representing the seller, what can I do to help you? Or is there nothing that I can do to help you? Because I know, so there is a law where the real estate agent and even the owner, homeowner, if they, call for the appraisal for themselves, we're really not supposed to be talking to you and saying, hey, this is what we need, or
Yes.
make sure it comes in at this price or it's not going to appraise.
Yeah.
Like
we cannot be value influenced.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. But is there anything that we can do, whether it's an agent or a homeowner, that will help you with the process so you know that you're not missing anything?
So what I love to see from a homeowner, because they really know the home the most intimately, is a nice list of improvements that they've done on the home. Major things like roof, hot water heaters, renovated kitchens. One of the things that I'm required to in a loan is to know approximately when the kitchens and bathrooms were updated within 5 years. So just kind of generally knowing when you've done updates and have a nice list for me ready. It simplifies it for me as I'm going through the house and looking at all of the finishes. And it's just nice to take with me. And from an agent, every appraiser is different, but I do, I appreciate when they have the deed printed, the little CMA printed, whatever details that they know about the house, what they know about neighboring homes that have sold that they find similar. I find that very helpful. To be pushed to meet a number isn't allowed, but to be a data source is great. So I love to ask questions of an agent who's been in that neighborhood and, shown these houses. But some appraisers just want to be left alone and to walk through the house. So just kind of gauge how open they are and how receptive they are to taking information in.
Right. So that's valuable. And, different agents work a little differently. I typically try to have some kind of like an FAQ, a favorite answers and questions. And the big reason I do that is, listen, guys, if you have a lot of improvements and you've maintained this home and, you've put some significant money into it, it's good for the appraiser to know this. And I like to highlight this and share it with the appraisers when I do meet them to open up the door. And just for the general public, when we're there, we just really just open up the door and, we let the appraiser in, and that's pretty much where it ends. I mean, if we know each other, we could say hello. Obviously, it's a small, world out there. But outside of that, the appraiser is measuring, the appraiser is taking pictures, checking, specific things. Again, VA and FHA, government funded loans, you may have to run the water, you may have to, go into the attic and take a picture, right? So we just make sure that the house is accessible and it's ready for you to go in and appraise it.
Yeah, I do find it helpful to have an agent show up and at least unlock the door, because oftentimes there'll be like something that's locked that I can't get into, like a shed or a garage. A lot of banks make me take the pictures inside of those areas, and I charge to come back. So having an agent open the door for me and just be available if anything's locked saves your buyer money.
Right. Right. That's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah. So let's see what else that I have in here. So, so as far as the lender, why does the lender need an appraisal? What are they justifying?
So they are trying not to overextend their credit line. So basically they need to know that if for any reason you don't pay your mortgage from day one, they can sell that house for what they paid for it the following day. It's an analysis of risk. Okay. So, basically I'm there to make sure that they don't overextend themselves.
Right. Right. And that's well said, because a lot of times, the part of the steps of the purchase process is obviously a mortgage. If there is a mortgage involved, even some cash sales will also want to have an appraiser go in to make sure that they're not overpaying as far as cash is concerned. Yeah. But, the appraiser is really there to assess the risk of the loan And should that appraisal not come in where it needs to be, what happens?
So I like to, I personally, I make sure if I'm not coming in, I've reached out, reached all my resources, really analyzed the market. At that point, it's up to the buyer and seller to renegotiate their terms or just walk away from the deal. There have been instances where a buyer was paying too much and they could go one block away or right down the street and find something for less. So it's just up to whatever the situation is, the listing agent and the buyer agent, and to renegotiate at that point.
Right, right. So in the crazy market that we're in right now, there has been a lot of appraisal gaps, which means that if somebody's negotiating a contract and say they're willing to pay, $20, $30, $40, $50,000 over list, the seller side will say, hey, that's fine, we'll accept your offer. However, we don't want to guarantee the appraisal, which means if for some reason you came in at a lower number, the buyers would have enough liquid money to put down towards that loan in order for the rest of the financing to come through and be approved by the lender.
Yeah, that's just, to me, on a macro level, that's a sign of a healthy market. That's what should be happening. Before the crash, in 2008, people were overpaying and overextending their credit limit. Now, if they're going to overpay, they have cash to come up with the difference. So it's a sign of a healthy, increasing market, unfortunately.
I know. Yeah. Well, I tend to reach out to appraisers a lot just because whether I'm evaluating a home or, hey, what's going in the market? And it's just good to have this discussion because technically, what a lot of sellers don't realize is, yes, we're putting our house on the market and we're pricing it based on the market, but we're selling it 3 times. We're selling it to the agents because we want the agents to tell all of their buyers and get excited about this house. We're selling it to the buyers, but ultimately we are selling this house to the bank because most people will use a mortgage. And if we're selling it to the bank, the appraisal process is a really important step because if the appraiser goes in and can't value that house where that price is listed, then, or the contract price has been agreed upon, then we could have potentially some issues.
Yeah. This market's been a little bit difficult because the inventory is just not there. But in a stable market, the principle of substitution really holds the most power with lenders. So they want to know that you're paying what your neighbors would pay.
Right. Interesting. So the market does have a factor into different markets. Say if it's a really strong seller's market.
Yeah, supply and demand.
Value something that maybe came in $50,000 over list and you don't have any closed sales.
Well, I would reach out to the agents first of all and see how they price the property, both the buyers and the sellers. The buyers have to have some sort of reasoning, some sort of support. It can't just come out of nowhere. So
you'd be surprised.
I have to base
multiple offer situation. I'm saying they're pretty much giving, up their firstborn to get a house right now. It's not funny.
That's right.
But buyers are probably doing more than they would normally want to do based on the competition that's out there.
I have to base my numbers on historical sales data. And I can analyze trends and make market adjustments according to what direction the market's going in, but it has to be supported by things that have already happened. So, if the market's steadily increasing at 1% per month and I have data to show it, I can make adjustments that way, but I can't, if someone's say spending $50,000 over asking, but there's no historical data to go off of or any support for that upward adjustment, I can't just make
that's when we could get into trouble. Right.
Yeah.
And I remember when after the pandemic, when the market started really appreciating and, that's when we started seeing the crazy multiple offers where there was some concern about the appraisals not coming in because we really didn't have enough closed inventory to compare.
Yeah.
I remember meeting some appraisers, basically waving my head saying, I don't know how this is going to appraise,
Yeah.
just because there wasn't anything to substantiate. And because the market was moving at such fast pace, most of them did come in.
Yeah.
Or the buyers had the additional money to put down on the loan because they still opted to buy the house.
Yeah.
So very interesting. Now let's talk about, like, for me as an agent, I'll sit down with the seller and, they're thinking about selling the house, and, what can a homeowner do to maybe improve the value of their home that you would, use towards, increasing or making that appraisal a little bit higher? Is there anything that a homeowner could do to get their house ready for the market?
So the best return on your investment is having a redone kitchen or updated kitchens and bathrooms. Those really get the buyers excited. As far as a budget conscious improvement, a fresh coat of paint on the house makes the house feel brand new. So those are the two things that I think about. Obviously redoing a kitchen is a very big expense, but repainting the house is a much more budget friendly, and you can really open yourself up to, that fresh new house smell and feeling like you're up to date with the trends, with picking out your trendy paint colors.
Right. What about repairs? Because I talk to my homeowners about repairs. What if something's broken? What if the roof is leaking? Like, I think there are some big items that need to be addressed, whether they want to or not, such that it will actually have the opportunity for financing to be approved.
In an increasing market, I do feel like you'll get the most bang out of your buck with making the house as updated and perfect as possible. And I guess in a decreasing market as well, because at that point, buyers are a little bit less able to make those repairs themselves. So yeah, I would agree with doing the basic repairs if, like, the roof's leaking or you have a cracked window.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because I know there's also some FHA guidelines, which obviously, for conforming conventional loan, I think, where it's not as strict. However, missing handrails, peeling paint, we have to. So, I mean, as the most minor things that are needed, from my understanding, is you have to have a roof over your head.
Yeah.
You have to have a functioning kitchen and a stove that works. And you have to have plumbing, right? So you could take a shower, go to the bathroom, right? So is there anything else that I'm missing?
So with FHA, there's safety, security, and structural soundness. Those are the three S's with FHA. So I had one that I did the other day where the house was in great condition until I got outside and I saw the side door was about 5 feet off the ground and it had no steps. Okay. So that, is a safety issue.
Right. Okay.
Someone could just open the door and walk and fall 5 feet onto the ground.
Right. So you mentioned safety, structural, and...
Safety, security, and structural sound.
All right. So what's security?
Security would be like you've got a missing window pane so anyone could walk in.
Okay.
Or the
missing door.
Yeah. So I had one where, the upstairs had an enclosed porch and you don't necessarily need windows, but at that point where with the missing windows, it's a risk of falling.
Right. True.
And anyone could climb in.
Right.
Get in the house.
Okay.
The other thing is, sometimes houses have bars on them. Mm-hmm. So for someone to be able to escape in a fire, those bars need to have an unlatchable hook. Like it needs to be able to, they need to be able to get out in case of a fire. So
right.
a lot of times these bars don't have that. So that becomes an issue as well.
And I've seen those in our area, and I've never even thought of that. So that's actually something, a little aha for me, because you do see that, or even
Yeah.
like an egress exit in the basement, right? So when
Yes.
you go in, if somebody finishes a basement. So let's talk about that. Finished basement. Somebody throws $20,000, $30,000 into a finished basement. It doesn't have a secondary egress window. It might have some electric heat in it. Like, how are you valuing this? It's 70% below ground, so it's
Right.
basically fully in ground. How do we, because there's a lot of these out there, and we're always having these conversation with either the homeowners or the buyers, like there's not a lot of value in it as far as I understand.
I do a match pairs analysis. So every market's different. So like in a resort market, a finished basement, like in a ski town, they're pretty prevalent and they can be pretty comparable to above grade area due to the fact that you're packing, multiple generations of families in, or you're
Right.
renting it out and it rents out at the same value as above grade living area. And then there's other markets where, for example, a raised ranch, the basement area, even though it's beautifully finished, doesn't sell for as high as the above grade area. So you really have to know the market area that you're in. Some areas it'll just out the same, and some areas it won't. It'll be
Right.
inferior. Yeah.
Interesting. I know this, the split ranches, the raised ranches, sometimes if it's a neighborhood where there's a bunch of them, then it's easier to comp because
Yeah.
you just kind of look to see what the sales look like and, how it was valued. If a homeowner has an old appraiser, I ask them for a copy just so I could kind of take a look to see what an appraiser did in the past.
Yeah.
And then we can talk about how we're adjusting some of those based on, what a future appraiser may look at. So do you think that most appraisers are looking at the same thing? Or if I had, like, just for instance, if I hired 3 appraisers to appraise my house, would they be very close in price? Or do you think they might be a little bit different?
They should be very close in price in a homogeneous neighborhood where sales are very similar. I do a lot of rural areas where comps can be kind of crazy, or if you have a unique property, that might be a little bit wider of a range, but you'll have a very tight range in a neighborhood where there's a lot of sales and a lot of support.
Right. So that's good to know. So if somebody doesn't like an appraisal, doesn't mean they're going to hire somebody else and get a better price that they think that they should get.
Yeah. Yeah. Unless there's like a material defect, in the report.
Okay. So we talked about adding value. How about, what could really, bring down a value of a home considerably?
So I look at market standards, how buyers would react. Some things like that you really can't physically see, like smokers.
Okay.
Buyers might, you'll have beautiful pictures and then you walk into the house and you're overwhelmed by the atmosphere that smoke creates. So that could really devalue a home. There's so many things. Location influences, being right next to a highway. I could be 1,000 things, honestly. I could go on.
Okay. All right. I mean, we talked about defects, we talked about structure, all of that. But, I think what you're saying, like being on a main road, you probably bought the house less because it was located on a main road. And, when you're ready to resell it, it will probably comp less than maybe a neighbor, inside the neighborhood because of where you're located.
Unless you're in certain markets where there's just nothing and you're in an area that everyone's trying to get into. So like, again, the law of supply and demand, selling at the right time can also really help you or hurt you.
Right.
When you have
it's interesting that you're saying the law of demand, supply and demand, because right now it's tough. It's a little tough to price these homes just because, everything still seems to be going over list. And I think preparing the home so it shows its best, no matter what condition it's in, even if you have pink carpets and it's outdated, as long as it's clean. And I think the mechanicals and the big things are, serviced, and we can show that house at its best light, you're still going to get top dollar today versus, maybe just leaving a house as is completely and not doing the few little extra things that could add the extra value in today's market.
That's true. Yeah. I agree, especially right now.
Awesome. So let's see. So we talked about market data. So the market data will also influence. Let's see. Anything that potential sellers or homeowners can do to increase. So we talked about that. So as far as an appraiser, I mean, again, we talked about this. There's really no shortcuts that you're going to take just to help somebody with an appraisal.
No, yeah, no.
You know, we have that asked, you know, those questions are asked, like, what can we do? Is there any shortcuts?
Yeah, no.
It is what it is. You're following the guidelines.
It is what it is, you know.
Yep.
I'm doing multiple appraisals a day, day in and day out. And, you know, having appraised during the time when people were foreclosing a lot, you really see how important it is on a large scale to really come up with an accurate and fair opinion of value. It matters. It really does matter. I know that everyone, you know, a seller wants the highest price, and that's your job, is to get them the highest price. Yeah. My job is to provide the most probable sale price.
Right. And I love that, because that's important. You are that third party that shouldn't have any best interest to anyone other than, this is my job and this is what I'm doing. You know, and let's remind everybody that this is your career. This is your industry. This is you're a licensed professional. So if you start doing bad jobs and you're listening and are influenced by realtors or homeowners, you could potentially lose your license. So it's not worth your license or your job. You have to pay bills. You have a family to take care of.
And there is something called collateral underwriter. So Fannie Mae has this big data holding center. So they're actually comparing all of my information to other appraisers' information in the same market and same comps at the same time. So if I'm this one, you know, rogue appraiser coming in at all these high numbers, and everyone else is coming in at, you know, whatever the market supports, you'll eventually get flagged and then kicked off the list anyway. So it doesn't help the market in general, but it also, I wouldn't be an appraiser for very long if I was.
Yeah, interesting. So this is good to know. It's like, this is your job, this is your profession, and you have guidelines, and you are being watched by a bigger entity to make sure that you're not out there doing some crazy thing in the field, and that, you know, your appraisals match what others are saying about the market, because that's why you're there. That's why that third party came in. I mean,
and as in general, in lending, most banks automatically review 10% of their appraisals. They have a full appraiser go out and do a review appraisal of at least 10% of their loans that they generate.
Really?
Just to ensure that accurate values are being produced.
Wow. So the appraisal that you did yesterday, somebody could be driving by it and assessing it to make sure that you did it right.
Yeah. Yes.
Yep. So, all right. So it's all legit and it's important. Let's see. So
I really enjoy going into different homes and meeting different people, and, you know, what career, I mean, in a given day, I'll be doing a foreclosure and a mansion in any given day.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. So you know a lot, you see a lot. And, you know, what if somebody wants to question your appraisal? How does that work?
So most banks have if you're calling, you know, for an appraisal for a bank, they have their own process. I know VA has a very specific process. And then most banks, there needs to be a defect. So for example, have your realtor, say you're not happy as a borrower with your appraisal, and you feel that, you know, it should be something else. Have your realtor do the research, make sure that the comps that the original appraiser picked were the best. Maybe they missed one or two or three. And you can submit those to the lender. Say, hey, you know, they missed this one, which was actually like a beautiful comp and matches the subject perfectly. Or you can look for a material defect. So for example, say an appraiser missed an entire bathroom, that takes away from the final opinion of value. Or there's a second lot on the property that the appraiser, you know, didn't see. So there's, 5 acres that the appraiser didn't add into the appraisal. So there could be a multiple reasons.
Mhm.
And, having an agent there who knows the market can really help you in defending and coming up with a new value.
Right. So let's just kind of dissect that just a little bit. So I'm meeting the homeowner and I'm in a specific neighborhood. Maybe there's 30 houses in this neighborhood. And, the next neighborhood over, which is similar, maybe it's, not exactly, but maybe built within, 5 years of that neighborhood, whether it's older or newer. And all the seller or the homeowner sees is that one comp that was sold in the other neighborhood that's much higher, and that's what they want to price their house. Are you looking at that comp in the other neighborhood, or are you more concentrating on the comps in that specific neighborhood where we are? And is that something that we should be discussing more with our sellers?
So if I have multiple comps in the neighborhood, I'm going to go with the direct neighborhood.
Okay.
If there's a reason to go outside the neighborhood, I'm going to make sure that I know what the impact is. So there might be cause for what's called a location adjustment. And I will extract that from historical sales data. So I might do a market study of the subject neighborhood versus the adjoining neighborhood that you're talking about. And there might actually be a market reaction. And you can quantify that with a market study. So it might sell for 3% higher or 5% higher. I would come up with, if I'm going to use a sale from that neighborhood, I would come up with that adjustment.
Okay. So that's interesting because, that's what happens a lot. It may be exactly the same style of the home, and how is age? I mean, we talked about this, I had a house that, was in a specific school district and it was a colonial, but it was built like in the 1800s. And colonials that were like 1960 and higher were selling, at the price that we got. However, we couldn't find enough comps on that specific home because of the age. And the appraiser, and I talked to several appraisers, and all the appraisers were saying, we really can't use the other comps because the age is so significant in this one, because it was 100 years older than anything else that was out there. So it was interesting because it was still colonial, it still had the number of bathrooms, still had the number of baths, and that adjustment factored into the way they appraised it, and the appraisal actually came in a little bit low.
Interesting. So every market's different. Some areas a historical home might sell higher. Some areas it might sell lower. It
wasn't historical. It was just older. It was just older.
Okay. It's such a specific question because there have been these homes that are 100 years old and they're beautifully renovated. And if you're comparing it to like a 1960s colonial that hasn't been touched, the older one might be better. So it really is specific to each situation.
Interesting. So, So, I mean, anything can happen, as far as, again, whatever you need the appraisal for, but as far as the sales, this is why we do have a range. I usually come in with a range, and then, I really base it on, where are the sellers feeling, and, we're comparing the condition, how does your kitchen compare to your next door neighbor? How does your, the number of bedrooms, baths, condition, your roof, how old is the roof? How old is the furnace? All of that factors in. So if we can push it towards the max price, great. But if we have some, maintenance issues that may be concerning to the buyer, we're going to adjust that a little bit lower. So that's how, as an agent, that's how I would work my price range. And, I feel as the market shifts a little bit, those conversations on pricing are going to be more strategic and very important to have, because it's going to be a little bit tougher to price and hit that magic number that will make that house, sell at top market and in a quick time, shortest period of time at, and at value that the market is delivering at that time.
Gotta love those changing markets.
I know. So let's see, what else did I have? All right. So how is an appraisal different from an inspection?
Do you mean an assessment? like a or
No, inspection and then the assessment. So, all right. So which one do you want to cover first? Because I think homeowners sometimes confuse like, well, why are they coming in and inspecting my house again? We already had a home inspection. So how are you?
We've actually, as appraisers, we've discussed the terms. Often we say inspection and it does confuse, the owner or the borrower.
Yes. Yep.
It really should be called an observation, an appraisal observation.
I love that.
Our observation is very visual. We don't move anything. I mean, we turn on lights and test water at the most.
Yep.
Some lender guidelines will require us to make sure that the hot water heater is properly vented, so it doesn't explode. But really, that's the extent of our technical
evaluation.
Yeah. Anything that it requires an expert, we have to call for an expert. So I might see like a giant hole in the ceiling. I can't say that roof is defective. I have to call for an inspection because I am not a qualified professional. Whereas a home inspector can say the roof's defective. So they're more technical in their inspection and their expertise. I am really just there to gauge a buyer's market reaction to the house in its current condition.
Okay. That's I like the way you worded it because it is a little confusing sometimes. And, I know that, again, the government funded loans may require a little bit more for you to inspect. Again, I'm going through some continuing education right now, and there was some question about like a buried oil tank, or they noticed the pipes. And I just had something similar happening, but it happened for a different reason.
It's funny. It's so true. Buried oil tanks can be really bad. It can seep, a leaking one can seep into your water supply if you have a well, and that can be really, really toxic. Some of the things that we're required to look for, like with FHA for the well and the septic, sometimes you can't even find the septic. So then you have to call for, a survey. Towns often have the surveys on file. Because
they have to be technically 100 feet apart, in order to pass the government. And then there's ones that may be grandfathered in.
Got right in there with that.
And again, for a professional that's helping a homeowner that maybe is putting the house on the market, it's important for us to have that conversation. Do you know where the well is? Do you know where the septic is? So when the appraisal comes in, it helps you not having to come back, and it helps you assess the property easier and smoother transaction.
Having your listing agent really know some of the basics about financing, that it would help them to not even consider an offer for a house that wouldn't qualify for FHA. So for example, a house on a very small lot that has well and septic, you might not have the space to have your well and septic be 100 feet apart. You would know then, this isn't going to be a good fit for an FHA buyer. You might not consider their offer.
So again, different guidelines to think about, different things that could happen as far as financing. The question to a seller is, who are we going to be selling this house to? What buyers are we looking for? And if there's financing involved, is it going to match all of the financing guidelines? And if not, how can we best prepare it? And or how do we market it accordingly so we're getting the right buyer to the table?
Exactly.
Perfect. So one last question. Let's talk about the assessment. It's a big one. I was on the radio show. People are very confused. What's, hey, my assessment is this, but I think my house is worth a lot more. So let's review assessment versus the appraisal. That's a big one.
So an assessment, in every assessing areas operates a little bit differently. So an assessment is a mass appraisal. They're literally only valuing it based off of the outside of the home. They don't see any of your improvements that you've done inside. So you might actually have a lower assessment if your outside hasn't been updated or improved in a while. It does go based off of sales. However, they're doing it on such a massive scale that it's not as accurate as a real appraisal. And it is based on the exterior. So they really don't have any way to see inside your home. And so if you've got a beautifully renovated home, you're not really going to be assessed as high as you could be if you had a real appraisal done.
Right, right. Okay. And usually what I tell people, the assessment you want lower because your taxes are valued based on the assessment of that's what's on the town tax record. So we sort of want those to be low.
Yeah.
And depending on the area, it's not always at 100% assessment. So different neighborhoods and cities may have a 96% assessment of your total assessment. That's what we're evaluating your taxes on.
And so that's maybe why it comes in lower. The other thing is when I come in and do an appraisal for any reason, I'm not reporting it to the town in any way. So I often get asked if my appraisal is going to go to the town and raise their assessment.
Okay.
So when you're getting an appraisal, it's your personal private appraisal, unless you want to publish it somewhere.
That's good to know. Like, see, this is why you're on your end, you're getting different questions than I am as far as a realtor on my end. So I would have never even thought of somebody asking that question, but I mean, it's something that's recorded, but it's a personal thing that you're almost purchasing like a home inspection. And unless it's for the bank, if it's for you, just so you know what the appraiser would value your house at, it's sort of kept secret.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. All righty. And would you recommend, say I'm valuing a home for a seller and we're not in agreement on a price. And, my next step could be, hey, I really want to work with you and they really want to work with me, but, our only thing is we're just not in agreement on price. Do you think getting a third party such as an appraiser involved and helping us put a price on that home, do you think that's something that sellers or homeowners could consider?
Of course, I am biased. I believe that everyone needs an appraisal.
And I almost agree. Right.
Yeah. If you're in a complex area and you really need a little help honing in on that value and what's going to put you at the best position in that current market, I would get an appraisal for sure. It just makes the most sense. You've got all the market data, everything will be laid out, everything will be analyzed and in report form for you. And it's objective. So sellers tend to have their heart, invested in the home.
A lot of emotions. Correct.
Yeah. Yes. It's tough. Yeah.
So and every seller thinks that their house is worth a lot of money. We all do. I mean, we know some of the imperfections, but it's my house. I had my family here. I've been here for 30 years. So the emotions are definitely involved. And especially in a fast-paced moving market, sellers sometimes may think that their house is worth a lot more than it truly may be. And, our job is really, like you said, to hone it down. So I think, as a secondary step, if you are in disagreement with a professional or you feel that you can get a little bit more value for your home, getting that third party appraisal step into the whole equation could help, both of the parties to come together. And I love the market data that it comes with. And, if anything, justify it, to the buyers as we're selling it.
That's true. It really will help you with knowing whether or not a buyer is going to be able to get financing at the price that you've got it at.
Yeah.
And it can also just be used as a tool. You don't have to go with the number that I'm going to come up with. Mm-hmm. An agent can say, hey, let's price it a little bit under and let's get multiple offers. Or, hey, the agent could say it's been, 2-3 months and we're in a really hot market. Why don't we appraise it a little bit higher? Set the price point at a little bit higher. Right. So it's a good stepping stone for whatever you guys, decide to do. And also based on whatever market conditions are going on.
Right. And I'm glad you said that because somebody may say, hey, I just bought the house 2 years ago. My appraisal was this, but that was 2 years ago, right? The market is not the same 2 years ago. I don't care what market we're in. Usually when I talk about price, when I meet with you today and I give you a price on the home or we discuss a range, I'm very careful to say, guys, this is today's price because, inflation, interest rates, depending what happens tomorrow, this price could vary considerably, based on what's happening in the world and what's, any dips in the market or any, inflations in the market.
Yes, exactly. The market's constantly changing, just like the stock market. I mean, even you see it on Zillow on their little, as they track where they think your house is worth, it's going up and down constantly.
Yeah.
So.
And, just talking about Zillow, I feel like Zillow is like the assessment because, again, Zillow just looks at the numbers that are out there and they're not really, and they're doing a whole, like a macro pool of what's happening in a specific area, but they're not going inside your home. So it's okay that you look at the Zillow or the realtor.com or whatever is on the
It's almost
website.
like shooting at a dartboard. It's so generic. And oftentimes it'll show you like how they've come up with their assessment of your value, and the comps will just be like
all over the place,
similar.
Yeah.
So
they could be comparing a 3,600 colonial to a 2,100 square foot ranch, completely different styles. So So again, it could be like a starting gauge of, hey, we think our home could be worth somewhere around there. And then get the professional in, whether it's a realtor or an appraiser, to say, hey, let's, this is why we're making the adjustments based on market, based on style, based on size, condition, improvements, all of that good stuff really, really weighs in. And as we hone into, to a market price and the valuation of what it is worth today.
Definitely.
So what are your projections for the market?
Oh my gosh.
I love to ask.
It's a crazy time right now. We've got, the interest rates, they're not the worst, but they're not the best. It's really the low inventory that is keeping us hot right now.
Right.
We've got a couple of banks failing. So it's really an unusual time, something that we really haven't experienced before. I feel that, the summer is going to be pretty good, but I'm not too confident about this coming winter. Really, I feel like we're nearing the peak of the market for sure.
I do agree.
A correction is almost needed to keep the inflation in check. But you hate to be part of that. You hate to be in it, when people can't refinance and things like that. That's when it gets really tough to be in this industry.
Interesting. And, I feel like a lot of people are saying it's an unusual time because, it seems like employment is okay. People have jobs. And in fact, there's more jobs out there for people. Inflation did skyrocket. So, listen, there's some people are okay and they're still doing well. And then some people are really suffering, go ahead.
We have started to see an increase in foreclosures, nothing crazy. Foreclosures are needed in a healthy market. But, with COVID, all that got halted. So the effect of all of that is still to be seen. It's a very interesting time that we're in.
Yeah, no, it is. It's all going to kind of come to a head, I feel. And the good news, and I keep on saying this to, everybody that I talk to, whether it's in my profession or just, friends or just people that I work with, is that, we're not in a bubble because anyone, and you could probably justify this, most everybody that purchased a house within the last 3 years could afford it. And they were in a really good position to afford it. They had money to put down.
We had a lot of cash to be purchased.
Right? Yeah. So I feel like, we didn't have those, mortgages that were financing 110% and seller's concession. None of that was happening. So it was a healthy financial market as far as people purchasing. So even if there is a softening and or inflation tends to still go up, there's going to be some room for these homeowners to not go into a hardship. But obviously it's going to depend on how badly it is and, how quickly things change. But overall, I feel that this is going to be our new norm as far as prices. I don't think we're going to see a huge decline. And that's just my opinion, just being in in this industry for 20 plus years now. but yeah, we do need a correction because we can't continue to, these prices have to balance at some point. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of a pushback on the buyers already.
I do want to preface, what area we're in. We're in upstate New York. Other areas of the country have seen a decline, like California. And then there are some markets that are still hotter than ours. So we're still in this area in a pretty good position, but other parts of the country are declining.
Yep,
so,
you're correct.
Yeah, just so in case someone else who's watching us and they're like,
what are they talking about? Where do they live?
Yeah, we have low inventory right now. We have a lot of healthy cash buyers. We have a lot of in the outskirts. We have a lot of second homeowners and a lot of resort areas, and so we're still doing pretty good.
Yep. I mean, we're Albany. We're near the capital, so we're near state offices. A lot of colleges, professors, great hospitals. So we have a really nice mix of professions. And, I feel even in a soft market, we're a little shielded in this area based on that. However, you go, 2.5 hours down to New York City, completely different market. And
totally different.
The bigger cities tend to feel the shifts a little bit more than the smaller counties. But yeah, I mean, but overall, as far as home ownership, people need to, save. They should have a good, decent credit, debt to income, all of that good stuff, because it really, you don't want to be house poor. You don't want to find yourself in a position where you're going to short sale or be in a hardship.
Very true.
And you want to continue to have enough income and assets so you can continually, service and maintain your home such that when you're ready to sell, the value is there and you're building wealth throughout the whole time that you're owning your home, and equity, of course. That's the whole reason.
I agree. Home ownership is wonderful.
Yeah. Any last comments?
No, I just appreciate you having me on the show, and we had, a really good conversation. So
agree. So how can people reach you? And is this, are you available for, homeowners, and, what aspects of appraisals are you comfortable doing? So let us know a little bit about that. And I'm also going to post her links and everything in our, below the video, so you have access to that as well.
Thank you. So I am a certified residential appraiser. So I do 1 to 4 unit single family and multifamily homes. I do vacant land. I do specialize in high-end property. So if you have, a waterfront home or, a larger vacation home, I do a lot of vacation homes and estates. But really any purpose that you need an appraisal for, I do complete those. So I do stuff for IRS, divorces, estates, tax grievance, for lending, any reason you want a pre-listing appraisal, I am your girl. You can find me at New York or ny-appraisal.com. Go on my website and just send me a message, and we can connect that way.
Wonderful. Danielle, thank you so much. This was super informative. I feel like I've been doing this for ages and ages, but every time I talk to, somebody in the industry, I feel we learn from each other. So I appreciate all of the input. I appreciate your knowledge and your insight on the industry. And, I hope to do business with you in the future. And anyone that's looking for more information, if we didn't cover anything, reach out to Danielle, reach out to me. We're happy to discuss more. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes.
And we look forward to seeing you on a future video on Real Estate Explained. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Have a great day.